Hello, welcome. This is the Mild Opinion Podcast, Episode 1. I am Logan.
And I'm Luke, and today we're talking about the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
We're going to be starting off with the current events, with the most current event being that of the new Daredevil Born Again trailer.
Daredevil. I like Daredevil a lot. He's probably my second favorite Marvel hero to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Just because I like the dark, gritty part of him, and I really enjoy Kingpin as a villain. So I was a big fan of the Marvel Netflix series with Daredevil, and just to see it coming back. And with this new trailer, it looks so much like the old one, but with so much new stuff in it. I'm excited. I'm really excited for it.
I think it's important to note how similar it was to the Netflix one, based off of the new trailer, because a lot of people were worried about how the violence and all that stuff would get toned down just because it was a Disney production now rather than how it was with Netflix. But I think they've showed that they have definitely not skipped out on any part of the violence or anything. It looks pretty much tone-wise identical to how it was with the Netflix series, and I think that's going to get a very good reception from the audience.
Yeah, and they're really leaning into that dark. They're it was the big question whenever they announced that Born Again was coming out. Of if they matched the Netflix tone, and now we see it's coming out and it's on the same level as that. And I don't know if you've seen interviews or things that these actors have said about it or whatnot, but they've said there's scenes in it where they were this is even more over the top than what we had in the original thing. And with Vincent D'Onofrio, I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else. I know he's in the movie Full Metal Jacket, and he's really intense in that, is what I've heard. I've never seen the movie, but he, I feel was such a huge, important part of what made the Netflix thing so special. And even in the season where he wasn't the big bad, in season 2, he had such a domineering presence, and his chemistry with the Punisher when they're in prison. It was so good and so intimidating, and I really like villains like that are just so intertwined in everything that's going on, even when they're not the focus, that they're still a huge problem. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, and speaking of villains and presences and stuff like that, I think it is very cool that Muse is going to be a part of it, because unless you're into the comics and stuff, you're not going to know who Muse is as a Marvel villain. He's not a household name or anything like that. And I think it's cool that they're diving into more of the lesser known, more interesting characters, because I think from what I've seen so far, just off the trailers and what people are saying and stuff, even if he isn't the most important character, it is a very cool character to have involved in the universe and stuff, just for universe building and stuff like that. And on top of that, just characters like that, and then the Punisher coming back, and just seeing how all of them are going to interact and stuff in such a way in this small street level universe, it's going to be really cool, because obviously we know how big the MCU is, how far they can expand.
Yeah,
they're just like a fly on the wall of this cosmic everything that's going on in the MCU, and I think it's interesting to see how that's all going to play out too, because street level stuff, you have big names. Obviously you have Daredevil, Punisher, all that's going to be specifically in Born Again and all that, but also where they're going to go with other projects too, because obviously it's not just going to be Born Again, you know, because there can be other stuff that they can be in, Spider-Man, he's street level, stuff like that.
But we've seen he can make the jump to cosmic and multiverse stuff going on, and even over in Sony, it's Spider-Man at the nexus of the multiverse.
Yeah, and I think that's something cool that's gonna happen eventually, but where and when, how, where are these these characters gonna play into all of it, especially because we already have people like Moon Knight and stuff like that who are also street level and stuff like that, but I think there will be a bigger part for all of them to play, or else they wouldn't be doing all this. Because at the base level of Born Again, it's going to be, the street level stuff. It's Kingpin, it's Daredevil, it's Punisher, you know what I mean? Getting down into the nitty gritty of it. None of which, of those characters have real like superpower. They have superhuman abilities, but not really like superpowers. You know what I
And
mean?
well, like in the comics and everything, there's like a million different iterations of each character. So there's things where it's like Kingpin is like some super powered mega suit character, but like for this is like so much like for the MCU since the Netflix stuff. I don't really think there's been a huge street level character, except maybe like Spider-Man in Homecoming. He's pretty street level in that because he's like right on the cusp of possibly being an Avenger.
Yeah.
And like he's had meetings with the Avengers before, but in that movie he's on his own just trying to like make a name for himself and like prove himself to Tony Stark, but like he unveils this threat all by himself on the street that's very much like a street level threat, even though it's like, oh, they're stealing Stark technology and using it to make these crazy weapons and whatnot. But I think this is like a full lean into that street level that's been kind of out of the game for a while. And so I'm really excited to see it because also Daredevil, incredible. But also it's coming with that like grittiness that it's bringing to it, which is like we have Kingpin coming back, and then the things we know that we saw with like Bullseye. And I don't know a whole lot about Muse, but like what I know about Muse, it's gonna be dark. Like they're gonna lean into that like dark side of the street level. And they also, I shouldn't say there was no street level stuff because there was stuff like Echo and whatnot. But I felt like Echo kind of flew under the radar and was kind of like a lot of setting up the lore of her and Kingpin and how she fits into that story. And there was even that like Daredevil cameo. And way back in Spider-Man 3, No Way Home, there was that Daredevil cameo. So I feel like they've been laying the groundwork for like the street level return for a long time. And I feel like now there's so many old Marvel Netflix fans coming back, and then with this trailer coming out showing us that it's going to be like, it looks like it's going to be that same level of dark and grittiness, if not even more. And they've been taking their time with it. This project's been in the works for, I want to say like 2 or 3 years now. It's going to be, I feel like they've taken their time with it and they're going to do it right.
Yeah, and I think part of the thing about them taking their time with it and making sure that they're doing it right is because they know how big of a fan base that the Netflix series had with both Daredevil and Punisher, and with those characters and everything that they've been involved in. They know that the fans are going to critique what they've done. I think that's another reason why they had decided that even being a Disney project and stuff like that now, that they're going to lean hard, fully into the violence and the darkness and the grittiness of it, because they know that that's what the people who are interested in Daredevil and Punisher and everything, that's what they want.
Yeah.
And I think that all of that, and like you said, like Muse, it's dark. It's not, he's not some villain who's just going, harassing people, blowing stuff up. You know what I mean? Like, he's like...
This is very much for, like, that Netflix audience that saw, like, the unrated sort of way of these shows.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that makes it that cool, is just because they are acknowledging what they can do, especially when they get rid of the idea of like, oh yeah, like it's a Disney project now, but we can still make, like, it's Disney. It's one of the biggest production corporations on the entire planet. Like, if you take that amount of money, that amount of budget, that amount of staff, yada, 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 and then you put it towards a project like that, it's gonna be fantastic, or it should be.
It's kind of, it's just like a interesting spot that they find themselves in, because with this Daredevil thing, it's not a recasting, it's not decanonizing the Netflix shows. They know how big of an impact it had, and like, I feel like when those shows were coming out, everybody was like, oh, this is part of the MCU. And then there was a big question about it for a while because they all got canceled, and it was like, are they ever coming back? And I think that was a big question mark for a while for the MCU, is like, are we going to lean back into that violent nature of things? And I think it's a hard question for Marvel and for Disney because it's like so much of the Marvel content we've had up until this point has been friendly to so many different audiences, and like specifically with this, like to kids, like kids could watch the MCU without seeing Daredevil, right? But now they had their first rated R movie come out 2024, the only movie Marvel produced the year, Deadpool and Wolverine, rated R, and it wasn't like over the top violent. It wasn't as violent even as I would say Deadpool 1 or Deadpool 2 is, but it still had that violence aspect to it, and it was probably one of the more successful movies they've had in a while. So now, since they have that sort of returned confidence in that, and with a character as impactful as Daredevil, to like bring it back with him, and then even looking back to the other Netflix characters, like we see Frank Castle in the trailer, and I know I've heard rumors that the actress who plays Jessica Jones is going to be back for it, and I don't know if you ever got super into Jessica Jones. I really liked season 1 of it. I never got super far into season 2 or 3 of it, but I really liked her character a lot, and I think she'll be Kristen Ritter. Of course, that's her name. I think for what the tone is that we've seen and what the tone is of what that was too, it opens the door for other characters in that vein, like Iron Fist and Luke Cage, to come back.
Yeah, and I think with characters like that coming back and everything, adding to the more of the gritty street level and all that, it is important to note that with all of that going on, the world building set within the street level and dark and gritty stuff, along with what you said about the, how dark it is and stuff and how it could reach different audiences and stuff. Like, I think they have kind of began thinking about who the audience actually is because, back when we first got, the beginning of the MCU, the Iron Man movies and all that, it was, more kid friendly and stuff like that. But I feel like when like Daredevil and this kind of stuff specifically, and also Deadpool and Wolverine being rated R, and it also being a little bit more crude and stuff like that, they've realized that the people who are watching the beginning of the MCU,
they're the people that
they're the people who are watching it now.
Yeah.
Over 10 years later, they're all grown up. You know what I mean? And that's who's going to watch the stuff.
That's not to say like that they can't be making stuff that's like friendly to people of like all ages and stuff, because like it's Disney, they're gonna do it, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think with characters like this, who so long ago so many people were like, oh my gosh, this is like so much darker than the MCU, and then bringing that straight into the direct line of the MCU, I think it's just showing that they're starting to realize that they might have the right audience. Like they're starting to recognize their audience who's wanting to continue watch. These are the people who have watched this from the beginning to now. And it's like, for me, I think the first time I really got enveloped in the MCU was when I watched Avengers, because I think before that I'd only seen the first 2 Iron Man movies. And there's nothing like they're friendly to like, they're like pretty family friendly, but there's still like stuff like war and death and stuff all over them. I don't think Disney is like shying away, or like Marvel shying away from stuff like that, but like with characters like this, you can dive into stuff that is so much more real world, and not even like, of course it's like fictionalized and like stories that are written here, but it's so much more like in-depth, gritty, and there's just so much more room to tackle with that. And with the audience that's been here since the beginning, I feel like that's what they're starting to want.
Yeah, I can agree with that 100%. And also, jumping away from that a little bit, in the trailer that released today, where they're Daredevil's talking to Kingpin and all that, and Kingpin asks Daredevil, like, oh yeah, like, why did you stop being a vigilante and all that? Like, where have you been? What What do you make of that? Where do you think that's going? Where do you think he has been?
I don't know. I think there's gonna be a lot of story to that. Honestly, I think the She-Hulk thing, he shows up and they had that whole thing with She-Hulk where it's like he's also designing a suit for Daredevil and this is the suit we see in the show. I think that they imply in this trailer that Daredevil's been gone for a while.
Yeah.
That he kind of stepped away. And so I'm kind of getting the impression that She-Hulk might have been on the cusp of him like starting to like retouch on to coming back.
Mm.
And he says, or it's in the trailer, he says something about retribution where it's like retribution, he can't like turn his back on that, like that's how he's raised, is to seek retribution for certain things. I think I could see an end game playing into it, like with the blip and everything. There's been a lot of like weird things where people are like, oh, he was gone during the blip or he was alive during the blip. And it's like, well, either yes or no. There's going to be a lot of characters coming back where it's like, how did that impact them? And like, how did they regain that? So honestly, I feel like Kingpin coming in as the mayor in this, right? They show him up on the monitors in Times Square. They show him entering a sort of, looks like a very influential office space with a lot of cameras and stuff. And he's always been a character like that. Once he revealed himself way back in season 1 of Daredevil as like this false savior to the city. He's always been a character like that. I think that I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play with Daredevil, but with Kingpin, I think he was around during the blip. He didn't get turned to dust. I think he was around and was able to use that to sort of regain his power and influence, because that's a big 5 years. There's obviously going to be huge power grabs during that time. And I think for someone like him with so much influence and like holds on so many political and powerful figures, that would have been a prime time for him to come back, and it could help explain how he gets to being in a position of like a mayor now with so much power. And there's been all these rumors of Spider-Man 4. It feels like every few weeks there's a new thing about Spider-Man 4 where it's like, oh, the villain's changed, or it's going to be a multiverse story, or it's going to be street level story. One I've heard fairly consistent with that, and then if it becomes true, it'll help with what I'm about to say, is that Kingpin, regardless of it being multiversal or street level, will be an important character in it. And I think he's going to be in a position in Daredevil Born Again where he's able to spread his influence to do what these rumors are talking about, which is to target vigilantes in the New York, Manhattan area.
Yeah, and I think that is one thing that is important to know. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but we're talking about like the street level stuff and how Spider-Man is involved in that too. It is known in the comics and stuff that Kingpin, as much as he is a Daredevil villain, he is also a big Spider-Man villain. And both of them being in New York, the street level stuff, the more nitty gritty of it, and all that stuff, I think is important, especially coming off of where we left off in No Way Home, because of the fact that like no one remembers Spider-Man, no one knows who he is or anything. So at this point, once he comes back in whatever happens in Spider-Man 4, when he comes back as Spider-Man, it's like he's brand new all over again.
Yeah.
So that could lead to many different things, many different avenues for them to go down in the gritty street level stuff, because at what point, especially because Spider-Man lost it all. Peter Parker lost it all.
He did.
Like, what happened? Is he going to turn to more of like a darker side? You know what I mean?
I think he has plenty of reason to, which is scary for it, because it's also at the end of that Spider-Man movie we saw the symbiote
the
part.
Symbiote is...
I'm still not sure. I haven't seen Venom: The Last Dance. If the symbiote's going to come back around, but I'm sure you've seen the same things I have where it's like Noel is going to be the big bad for Spider-Man now. And so if the symbiote's coming into play with Spider-Man after that, I'm not sure. There's a lot of moving parts to that right now.
There is.
With the Sony stuff and with what's going to happen with Kingpin here. But I don't think by the end of Daredevil here that Kingpin is going, like, that thing's going to get wrapped up. That's what, for this version of Daredevil at least, that's what's made the drive of the character, is he's against the corruption and the evil being spread by people like Kingpin. Yeah. And it just is not going away, no matter how hard he fights, how close he comes to actually, like, killing him. Kingpin just keeps coming back, and I don't think it's going to be Daredevil Born Again with characters like Muse and characters like Bullseye coming back, and Kingpin. I don't think, for as long as the runtime as this show is going to be, I don't believe Kingpin is going to be a wrapped up and tidy answer by the end of the show. I think he's going to be, it might even get worse from where he is at the beginning of the show to the end.
I 100% agree with that. And I also would like to jump from how you were talking about how Daredevil was trying to get rid of the street level corruption and stuff like that. With Kingpin and all that, you know, him becoming the mayor of New York and all that, it can extend even further because of what's going to happen in New World Order, Captain America. Because that is a corrupt government.
Yep.
Much more than a corrupt mayor of New York.
It's the espionage governmental side of the MCU.
And we know that there's been a lot with Spider-Man and all that before, too. Yeah. Which could be a possible link between different avenues and stuff like that.
Sure.
Not saying that's going to be or anything like that. Especially just because it's not known that any of that stuff has anything to do with each other and all that. But just going off of the corruption and stuff like that, I'm very curious to see what they're going to do with Captain America and Red Hulk as the president and all that, because obviously we know Red Hulk
that lead.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting to see what they're going to do with Red Hulk and all that, and how they're going to explain all of it, and what the end goal is going to be for Red Hulk, Captain America, all that. Just because, as of now, we know, like, the base level stuff. We know what happened in Falcon and Winter Soldier and stuff like that. We also know about Thunderbolts, which we're tying in a lot together right now. But that's like the same.
It's the same level.
Yeah, it's the same level.
It's like a little more, I feel like Thunderbolts is going to come across as a bit more of like a Black Ops thing of that level of the MCU, like the espionage governmental side of things, or like the political part.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that level of things, I think we're going to start to see, just in general, as things start to get, it's still a ways off, but as things start to get towards the Avengers movies, there's always going to be so many opportunities and wants of the studio and of writers and everything to get everybody all into one place.
Yeah.
So laying the groundwork is never too early of a thing to happen. And I think with Captain America, you know, he's a leader, but there's no concrete version of the Avengers right now. There's like your reliables, like Captain Marvel's around. I think Nick Fury is still around somewhere. Yeah. And then there's Shang-Chi, who we now know. Doctor Strange is a big question mark right now too. If he's is he evil? I don't know. But I think Captain America at the forefront of assembling a new Avengers, which is what it kind of seems like to me when I'm watching trailers for these movies, and like the obvious direction for Captain America is to end up leading the Avengers. This movie feels to me like it's going to solidify him in that point as I am the new Captain America, I am the new leader. And I'm honestly really excited for that. I have a lot of things I'm nervous about for the movie. I have a lot of things I'm excited about for it. But I am excited that Sam Wilson is getting the opportunity to be Captain America on the big screen, because a lot of people, well, like he's his actor himself, Anthony Mackie, has said it, like, it's been how many movies or shows or projects or whatever since I've showed up as Captain America.
Yeah.
I think, I at least hope that he will have the proper time in the spotlight to like uphold his position as the new Captain America, and to like really show us that in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the government stuff, I think you can kind of see where all the stuff would blend together, even if, people from the bottom level don't end up anywhere at like the top, because obviously we have the Avengers stuff that will be coming out, Fantastic Four is coming out, which will be more so cosmic stuff, Galactus.
Way cosmic.
Yeah, stuff like that. And then at the bottom, trickling down, you have Daredevil and stuff, but it's not, necessarily where it's one of those things where Daredevil's going to be fighting Galactus and stuff like that. But like it'll all connect in a way, like you got the street level stuff with Daredevil, moving up a little bit. You kind of got Spider-Man, different stuff like that. That's a little bit closer to, Thunderbolts and stuff like that, Captain America, stuff like that. And then in Thunderbolts, confirmed that we have Sentry. That's where it starts to get to a little bit more of the cosmic. Big time cosmic stuff. And then Captain Marvel and all that, obviously, who's a little bit on Earth, a little bit away.
Yep.
So, like, it's stuff like that where it's not necessarily one going all the way up to the other, but it all meshes into a universe more similar to the comics, which I think they have said already that they're trying to go more comic accurate with a lot of this stuff. And I think it is very cool to see that you can kind of tell as they go forward that it is going in that direction a little bit. Sure. So I think that's a really neat concept that they have not really built on as much. I mean, they did a little bit because obviously they're comic book based movies, but now it seems like they're really heading hard into the world building of it. And like this is like the Marvel universe rather than like here's a story of all these different characters doing the same thing.
And I think to 2024, it seems like to me Marvel sort of took a step back to watch their impact, to watch their own impact on their own audiences, right? So they let out something they knew would be at least a relatively big hit. It turned out being huge. Yeah. Deadpool Wolverine was great. And something I thought was interesting with it is I feel like a lot of what's turned people off of the MCU recently is like how far everything is just like now it's all multiversal and there's like 10 to infinity different versions of each character. Something I felt like I wasn't expecting from that movie that they leaned into so hard was the multiverse aspect of it, and they like played it into their own strengths. So they took like Wesley Snipes' Blade and Chris Evans' Human Torch and all these other characters back, and they like gave them a full just incredible showdown with a bunch of different other characters that was just like wow. But also to bring in all these new ideas of like the anchor beings of a universe and things have to go exactly right or a universe uncrumples itself. I feel like it's both a hindrance and it's also like a really strong idea. It's just like there's so many different explanations for what's going on in the multiverse right now. It's like, oh, Loki's at the center of the universe now controlling everything. And then but wait, over in Sony, now since it has connections to the MCU stuff, like, is the Spider-Verse controlling everything? Or is it, well, we know it's not going to be Kang.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Now we know, like, Robert Downey Jr. is coming back as Doom. And if it's any indication of him being the main villain of everything here, like the next main villain, he's going to be at the center of everything going on like that.
I think with the multiversal stuff, another big aspect and point that needs to be made is with the addition of, some of the stuff that was owned by like Fox previously and stuff like that, the Fantastic Four, as well as X-Men and stuff like that, that it's going to be interesting to see where Marvel goes, because beforehand we just had like these, base Marvel superheroes, Iron Man, Captain America, different stuff like that. They added some of the Sony stuff with Spider-Man and all that, which was super cool. Obviously, everyone was very excited to see that when, along came him interacting with all them in Captain America Civil War and stuff like that. But now we have a whole plethora of character pools to grab from with, already we have Wolverine and Deadpool, mutants and all that, X-Men. And then we have an entire movie introducing like the Fantastic Four dedicated to like that stuff, which means, we're going to get Galactus and Doom and, the Thing and all of the Fantastic Four.
And I love the Fantastic Four too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see, because obviously we've had the Avengers, we've had the base Marvel heroes and stuff, but now we're going to have other teams as well. The Fantastic Four is going to be there to interact with them. We're going to have the X-Men there to interact with them. And also, I feel like this kind of makes, as weird as it sounds, the power scaling is going to be a little bit different, because those teams all, like, we've had the base Marvel, the street level, cosmic level, and all that, but
they're going to be the first cosmic multiversal like team. Like that's going to be their shtick, because it's like they've said, and I think it's been a thing about the new Fantastic Four for a while, is that they're not the main Marvel universe that we've been seeing in the MCU. Like they're still MCU because now everything is, but they're in this world where they haven't had what we've seen so far. It kind of looks like that very like utopian sort of 1950s.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I'm getting for that universe they've created for him. Somewhere along the line, they're gonna draw, and it'll probably be in that first movie. How does this universe get to this universe, and why are they important to one another?
Yeah, and I think if you see the direction that's going, it'll make a lot more sense, because knowing what we know about now, it's like, oh, well, how are they going to get there? How is this important? Or why is this important? And once they show you that clear path, which hopefully it's one of those things where they do resolve it with the plot of the movie, and it's not just one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, here's the Fantastic Four, look what they done, and then you're just left unknowing what's going to be going on going forward. Yeah. But when it comes down to a lot of stuff, honestly, comic-wise, Reed Richards is vastly important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's good that they can now use him in the MCU, because they can go into deeper stories involving the people such as that, like the Illuminati and stuff like that, which, not saying that's what's going to happen, but, just an example.
They've touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. And just stuff like that. Like, it is very cool and important to note that we have those characters available to be pulled into the MCU whenever they are needed.
And I think, too, something the main MCU, with what we've watched grow from the beginning, we've seen almost all of the main original Avengers are out of the picture now. So, like, I think the only two left are Hawkeye and Hulk.
Yeah.
And Thor. No, Thor's still around. They're all very different from how they were. So, I think, in a weird sense, and it's been part of a problem too, is like they need new blood characters, but there's also, they've had new blood, it's just been very like obscure, abstract, where it's like people don't know necessarily about what the deal is with a lot of characters they're reintroducing. So like their big cards left that they're playing are Fantastic Four, X-Men, and then, with the darker supernatural side, like we've talked about, they still haven't shown up with Ghost Rider, who's got a huge fan base. They still got to return to Moon Knight after season 1 of that show, which I loved that show. I know a lot of some people didn't like Moon Knight season 1.
Yeah.
I thought it was good, and I want to see more of Oscar Isaac in that role. But it's like, I think they have more, I guess I want to say, tricks to play than they think, just because it's like, yes, we've had that first go of the Avengers, and now it's like, who's the next Avengers? But it's also like, it's not, Marvel isn't only the Avengers. What defines Marvel is like all of these other things we can explore, like the X-Men, with so many like, I want to say like complex ideas, is like how they fit into society, and like that they're oppressed with the Fantastic Four, and like the extremely like fabric of reality things they fight with.
Yeah.
And this goes hand in hand with another thing you said, which was talking about like power scaling, which is something that makes me nervous, right? Because it's like, yes, the Fantastic Four usually deals with stuff that like other characters can't unless the Fantastic Four is there or they've had experience with this kind of thing before. If Galactus showed up to the MCU right now before the Fantastic Four, who would show up to stop him? It would be like Captain Marvel would probably be the biggest threat.
Yeah.
But with movies like Thunderbolts coming out, we're getting Sentry. And then, there's been like talks of where they're going with Hulk.
Yeah.
I've heard several things where it's like Hulk might reach World Breaker or like World War Hulk levels here. And it's like, with big threats like that, which are the seemingly next logical step for a lot of these stories, you need equally powerful characters or people who have the problem-solving capabilities to deal with something like this to show up. And right now in the MCU, there's just not really that.
I think one of the best ways that they will have to combat that, especially with like talking about like Galactus and stuff like that, like characters that are that big, like you said, we have Captain Marvel, we're gonna have Sentry. That is huge. I think one of the biggest things where you're gonna get a plethora of characters, a lot of which are vastly powerful, is the X-Men.
Yeah.
Because it's known that, it's in the X-Men universe, you have people who are not saying weak, but just very street level. That goes all the way up to people who are cosmic level, just in the base of their power.
Variety. And like
with the Omegas,
I feel like too, the X-Men were never, for me, like, I've always liked the X-Men, but they've never been like my main draw to Marvel. I know a fair amount about them, but they're not the ones I'm the most knowledgeable about. So it's like, I feel like the ones I know the most about are the ones that I've seen in the movies. So it's like Wolverine, and I know there's all these different iterations of these characters that are immensely more powerful, but I've seen Wolverine, and the ones I'm used to are like Professor X and Mystique and Magneto and all these characters, and I know some of them are incredibly powerful beyond what I've seen before, but there's also all these other characters out there where it's like I've never seen them reach the level that I know they can. So it's like in both the prequel sort of different reality X-Men stuff that's going on, they've done Dark Phoenix both times. Obviously they're gonna have to bring a Phoenix in at some point,
Phoenix Force.
But I don't know a whole lot about other characters on that cosmic scale from the X-Men. I know Professor X, even on paper, if you think about it for a while, it's like, oh my gosh, like this guy is way stronger than you'd ever think. And like Magneto, I think it was like, I remember watching like X-Men Apocalypse in the theaters when Apocalypse gets him to like tap into his true potential. And I was just like, I never thought of how disastrously powerful that actually is. I want to see more from the X-Men, and I not even it's kind of a worry I have about the X-Men is like, are they gonna jump too quickly to end of the world, like this person could snap their fingers and destroy everything characters, or is it gonna be that slow build to that?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've also kind of worried about the X-Men, because there are characters such as Legion, who is vastly powerful, cosmically powerful. In the comics, he is almost unbeatable. It's insane the things that he can do with his abilities, because his ability is pretty much everyone else's abilities. He can do almost anything. But it's one of those things where it's like, him as a character needs so much explanation. And I don't feel like it's just one of those things where you can't just jump into it and be like, yep, this is it. Here he is.
Yeah.
Because he requires so much backstory and so much explanation that you can't just introduce him and be like, oh yeah, here's him. He's going to fight Galactus. You know what I mean? Because that doesn't make any sense. Because everyone's just going to be like, oh, well, who is this guy? Like, we might know who he is, but in general, he will need further explanation.
Sure.
And I'm worried about, with the X-Men and Fantastic Four, that they won't provide what's necessary going forward. I'm worried that they're going to get too excited about having all these new characters and these pools of characters to play with,
that they're not going to give them the full time to flesh out.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's something I'm worried about with Thunderbolts. From what I understand about Thunderbolts, and I feel like some of this is on purpose misleading, but from things I've seen, heard, or just from like the impression I get from the trailer, it seems like they're making Sentry out to be like, yes, he'll be involved with the Thunderbolts, but I think he's gonna be like a problem for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you know about Sentry and what the deal is, and even I don't know a whole lot about him, but I know that no member of the Thunderbolts would be able to last a second against him.
No.
I am worried that they're gonna come up with some ridiculous reason that the Thunderbolts are able to take him down, and that then they'll just like kind of sideline him, because I Sentry himself, it's such a interesting character, but I think he's such a big step forward for the MCU, and in what kinds of characters we're dealing with, is he is incredibly powerful
Yeah.
in both the version of Sentry, which I know as little as I know more about him as Sentry. I don't know anything about Void except that he's more dangerous.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have been throwing a lot of different names out there that aren't even remotely connected to how the direction that the MCU is going right now, which people have talked about Gladiator, people have talked about Hyperion, Blue Marvel, people like that, and it's like, I mean, yeah, that would be really awesome to see people like, and even like the Nova Corps and stuff like that. Like, it would be so cool to see people like that going in that direction. I mean, against these super cosmic entities and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like, Sentry is like the first stepping stone in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have any basis to pull those people from, why are we even talking about it? Like, it's not like they're just going to be like, oh yeah, by the way, here's 15 characters that are cosmic superheroes. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we need to take time to get there, because I don't want to see that personally.
I do think though it's weird, because it's like, as much as we've seen Marvel kind of slow down to like take their time to like figure out what they're doing, or at least as far as we can perceive, it seems like there's a lot of big characters coming our way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yes, Sentry will be in Thunderbolts. We don't know where he's going after that, but in Fantastic Four, we know we're getting some iteration of Silver Surfer,
Mm-hmm.
which, in and of the character itself, in any iteration of Silver Surfer, it's going to be immensely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be... It's been talked about for the longest time, and I feel like every now and then I hear something about it. There's going to be a Nova project.
Mm-hmm.
Nova, another super powerful character.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fantastic Four coming in. I just don't want, I guess, the characters that aren't as powerful, like Captain America, to get sidelined by the threats that are coming because they can't handle it. Because, like, you can't hit Galactus in the face with a shield and expect it to do anything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Captain America is the, like, natural born leader of the Avengers, who are usually the ones who deal with threats like that. So I guess moving forward, with the threats that we know are coming and then the ones that are possible to come, there has to be a good balance of the characters that have been fleshed out fully enough already. Like the new Captain America, which he hasn't had a lot of time to shine other than the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He just gets, or he fully leans into, like, I'm Captain America now. And then this new one even looks like he's still struggling with that.
Yeah.
They need to give that the full time to hit for him to be the true Captain America after Steve Rogers. They just need new characters to be, I guess, solidified in where they stand. Because it's like, even Doctor Strange, who's super well established by this point, after Multiverse of Madness, he's a big question mark, because we know he's a huge threat to everything that apparently exists. And he doesn't seem to have a full grasp on the fact of, if I use these powers, bad things will happen.
Yeah. Well, and going on to the Doctor Strange and things like that, That's another thing, because like we've talked about the cosmic level, the street level, world and government level, stuff like that. I think we need to talk about the level that has honestly most of the pieces in place already, that just hasn't been really announced like solidly, is like the Midnight Suns and the supernatural level. Because as far as the Midnight Suns go, we're gonna have Punisher confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
We have Moon Knight. We have Strange. We have Elsa Bloodstone. We have Werewolf by Night. We have Man Thing. We have, well, almost, maybe, possibly. Who knows what's going on now with Blade? But
Blade.
we almost had that. Like there are a lot of pieces in place for the Midnight Suns, which would be huge, especially because in Agatha, the Agatha show, there's Mephisto hinted at and all that stuff talked about, which is one of the big reasons the Midnight Suns are even a thing in the comics. So with all those characters in place, obviously that is probably going to be the direction that they go in. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, because if that is the case, then they're going to have to do Ghost Rider. You can't not have Ghost Rider. Mm-hmm. And also, based off of the fact that we were supposed to have a Blade movie already, and then it didn't happen, and now it's kind of up in the air, I think that was the plan. That was their direction that they were planning on going in. And now they're trying to figure it out from there. But, nonetheless, there is a direction that they're planning on going in, whether or not that they just throw Ghost Rider in a post-credit scene, or he's a part of the movie. Same thing with, Blade, whether he's a post-credit scene or part of a movie or something. Eventually, we're going to get to stuff like that where it leads into more supernatural and stuff like that, as well as what's already going on with the cosmic stuff and the street level and all that. So I think that is another thing that I think is really cool, is since they're said that they're going to be going more comic accurate, they're going down all these different avenues like they do in the comics, where a lot of different stuff like that is happening at once. It's not just one bad guy fighting the whole world, stuff like that, kind of how it was at the beginning with like Thanos and stuff like that.
Now, the beginning.
Yeah. Just now
it'll be a lot of things coming from a lot of different angles.
Yeah.
Because I'm also like, I don't want Galactus to just be a Fantastic Four villain. I don't want him to stop at Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I agree. He's too big and too powerful to just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try and beat up this squad of 4 people, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And I also just think that it's going back to like the world building and stuff like that. They're doing a really good job of going the comic accurate way, as well as the world building, because I feel like a lot of people are getting stuck into like it's the MCU. How is this person going to interact with this person? And so on and so forth, because that's what they've done in the beginning of the MCU with, once again, like the Thanos stuff and all that. Sure. Everybody had a movie, and then they were part of the final battle and stuff like that. They all interacted. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen with the new MCU, because there's so many projects, so many different avenues. Everyone will interact with someone else, but I don't think all of them are going to interact together like they did previous.
And honestly, I hope not, because like we've talked about, like there's now so many different levels all functioning at once on the MCU, and there's some which seem like they need a lot more fleshing out before we know what's going on there. They have, starting at the bottom, it's street level to governmental level to, I would probably say after that, the like spiritual supernatural level to cosmic level to multiversal level. There's so many different things all working at once, and so many of them have been dipping into the multiverse too, that's like anything that's multiversal also touches all of those other aspects in so many different ways. I just am nervous, and I really hope that they find out a way to make it all come together in a very natural sort of like progression of events way by the first the next Avengers movie, which is I'm not, is it Doomsday?
Yes, that is Doomsday.
I hope by Doomsday they've wrapped it all sort of down to where they want each thing to move enough to where they're able to give a story like that with whatever they're planning with Doom.
Yeah.
Enough thought and enough time to make it not only makes sense but also sort of feel like this was the right decision.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the problem is that we were so spoiled with the first Avengers movies heading into the Thanos storyline and all that, because those came together very cohesively. They all made sense. It was all, there wasn't really anybody who was that out of place or anything in that storyline. But also, the storyline was not nearly as branched out as it is now with the MCU. And I think that's kind of what has people worried about it. But also, this feels more of like a, well, going back to them being comic accurate, this feels more like a, oh yeah, this is like going to be like comic booky